Just make sure you can hear my audio. We've been trying to vigorously try and fix this in the last half hour. So for those of you still with us, we appreciate it. So hopefully you're hearing me live. And unfortunately, you probably missed the best intro ever that we just did. And I don't think that can ever be duplicated. So we're not going to even try. We're just going to try and just get right into the information here. So in the meantime, though, we're just going to hang out for just a second or two. We're just testing audio. So for anybody who is doing is watching the video afterwards, just go ahead and skip up a couple minutes. Right now we're just going to test to make sure that everything seems to be working. So hang with us for just another few minutes.
You got the new link?
Yeah, I'm pulling it up right now.
Give me some extra time to make some stuff up.
I check to see in the chat if anybody can hear me.
All right. We're good to go.
All right. So, again, thanks everyone for bearing with us. Sorry it's taken so long. Technology isn't the best when it comes to both of us trying to put our heads together and fix it, but somehow we made it work. So, thanks again for bearing with us. We had a great intro that we're not going to try and duplicate here again, but what you're here for is the info, so we're just going to try and get right into it. We've been running a little bit long on these, so this week we're going to try and run through things a little bit quicker. We will go ahead and go game by game, but some things we may not go as detailed into. So if there's any questions you have or any individual players you want to know about and we didn't cover it, just feel free to hit us up afterwards. To give a quick intro, again, my name is Marty, and I'll be the host for tonight. For those of you tuning in, you probably already know who the star of the show is. That's none other than Pat. You may know him as the DFS Saint. Pat, want to say hi to everyone real quick?
What's up, guys? Thanks for joining with us, and I'm glad to be here tonight. Let's get to it, man.
Yeah, let's just go ahead and jump right in here. So, first game we have on the slate, we have Denver at Cincinnati. Cincinnati is favored 3.5, and we have a really low over/under of 41.5. So this is, a little bit interesting of a game where we had Denver coming off a great defensive game, going up against the Cincinnati offense where Andy Dalton has actually been pretty good, surprisingly. Yet A.J. Green was pretty much shut down last week. So do we think that might be the same case here this week? Can he get shut down again?
Man, this Denver defense looks legit. I mean, they're getting into every backfield, wrecking shop on every offense that they've seen so far this year. I don't think I want any part of this defense on the Cincinnati side of the ball.
Yeah, really isn't, to me, any great plays for the Cincinnati side of the ball. Gio Bernard is somebody maybe interesting to look at from a tournament standpoint, and only DK just from the PPR standpoint. But other than that, yeah, this Denver defense is not really one that you want to mess with. Now going over to the Denver offensive side of the ball, pretty interesting game plan that they've been putting together the first two games. A lot of it's being fed into C.J. Anderson. Now, do we feel that C.J. Anderson could be in for another decent game here against the Cincinnati defense?
Yeah, I think this is one thing that I've talked about here so far in the first couple weeks is just targeting guys getting strictly volume, and we've seen weeks 1 and week 2. CJ really hasn't had that favorable of a draw yet.
Right.
And this really isn't that great of a matchup on paper if you look back to last year, but it is a little bit more favorable this year than it was last year. Cincinnati was without Vontae Burfict, so they're allowing a little bit more against the run, but just based on pure volume and touches, CJ should be able to have his way here because in week one, without Burfict, the Bengals gave up, if you're going by PPR numbers, their RB10 finished to Matt Forte, and RB3 finished to D. Will in week two. So the first 2 weeks, they've allowed Matt Forte is the number one player in fantasy, and D'Angelo Williams isn't too far behind him. So just in catches out of the backfield, pure rushing yardage, usage, and CJ looks to be set up for a good game here, where he's had targets through the first weeks, seven rushes, 66 yards, and 1 receiving in week one, and then last year's Bengals permitted the 6th most receptions to running backs. So this year is no different since they've allowed Forte and D. Will to have their way with catching the ball out of the backfield, and we know that CJ's no slouch when it comes to that as well.
Yeah, I agree. He's already got 10 targets in the first 2 games so far. Yeah, the Cincinnati defense so far, as you mentioned, has been giving up some decent yardage. So could be in for another good game here for C.J. Anderson. Anybody else from this game that interests you at all?
Oh, not at all. So, Cincinnati isn't that great in the secondary, but there's really, I don't really trust Trevor Siemian on the road. He has been targeting Emmanuel Sanders quite a bit. 16 targets for Manny as opposed to 13 for DT. Virgil Green has been hindered in practice and supposedly may miss this game. He's been seen in the walking boot. So they held Antonio Brown to only 4 receptions and 39 yards. They double teamed him. They even double teamed Eric Decker, who found the end zone. He always does. On only 3 receptions and 37 yards with 1 touchdown in week one. I think the Broncos are going to stick to their familiar game plan and fight, take the path of least resistance with CJ on the ground here.
Yeah, exactly. Game plan for Siemian is just don't screw it up.
Yep.
All right, let's move on to the next game then. This game's a little bit more exciting from a DFS standpoint. We have Oakland going into Tennessee. It's a pick 'em at this point, so it's an even game. Yet we have a 47 over-under. So, Vegas is thinking there's going to be some scoring in this game. It's going to be pretty evenly matched as far as Vegas goes. Let's start with the Oakland side of the ball. Carr's been doing a pretty good job spreading the ball around pretty decently, but Cooper... Crabtree, he typically got decent amount of targets last year, but Cooper seems to be the target monster this year. What are you thinking about Cooper in this matchup here against Tennessee?
Yeah, so far this year we're looking at 20 targets on 2 weeks for Amari Cooper and 14 for Michael Crabtree. So only 6 more targets for Cooper. However, Crabtree has been targeted a little bit more in the red zone. So far, so he seems to be, if they're passing down the red zone, Crabtree seems to be the go-to guy. But what's tasty about Cooper in this matchup is in week one, Tennessee Titans gave up 7 catches for 103 yards to Stephon Diggs, who leads the NFL in receiving yards, and then in week 2, Marvin Jones went off for 8 catches and 118 yards. So. And we're looking at Amari Cooper, who's had successful weeks 1 and 2 at the Saints. In week 1, he went off and would have had a bigger game last week versus the Falcons had he not been knocked out of bounds by Desmond Trufant. He came back in. He only had 5 catches for 71 yards, but Desmond Trufant knocked him out of bounds to negate a long touchdown catch. So he sets up here. Yeah, it would have been a pretty good game for him in week 2, but he sets up for another good game here in week 3 with a great matchup.
Yeah, I agree with you. I definitely agree with you there. Not much else to add there as far as Cooper or Crabtree goes. Just, as you mentioned, Tennessee is giving up quite a bit of production to the number ones, and I don't see this being anything different for Cooper in this matchup. Let's move over to the Tennessee side of the ball. Mariota is in an interesting situation as well. As we know, Oakland, just for whatever reason, has not been able to stop anyone when it comes to the defensive side of the ball. And they came into the season, everyone was kind of thinking it was pretty good defense, and still maybe, but just these first two games have been dreadful. The Raiders are giving up the number one pass yards per game and the most fantasy points to quarterback. So with that being said, do you think Mariota could be in for a good game here?
This sets up beautiful for Mariota here. Through 2 weeks, Oakland's allowing 500 yards of passing offense per game through 2 weeks. It's the most ever in the NFL. Over 800 yards of passing in the first two games. Last year in this matchup, Mariota was the QB3 in this game. He threw for 3 touchdowns and over 300 yards. And that's last year he didn't have the same. I mean, he had Walker, but now we have his go-to rookie in Tajay Sharp, who should be facing off against Sean Smith, who was burned in weeks 1 and 2 by Cooks and Snead. Cooks burned him for 6 catches for 143 yards and 2 touchdowns, and Snead for 9 catches, 72 yards and a touchdown. So Sharp was quiet last week in Detroit versus Darius Slay, so he looks for a nice rebound week for Sharp.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And just touch on Mariota real quickly. Last year against Oakland, he was able to score 3 touchdowns. And the other thing about Oakland is so far, in the 2 matchups they've had so far, both quarterbacks have ended up QB2 out of everyone. So, as you mentioned, this could be a great matchup for him. This could be a great opportunity for him to really shine. And he really hasn't been running that much this year, but we know he's capable of doing it. So, when you kind of put that together, he could put together some rushing yards and have a great game against this pretty bad defense so far. Altogether, he could be in for a pretty good game there.
Yeah, this looks to be a sneaky kind of a shootout style of game because with Oakland's defense allowing as many passing yards and touchdowns as they are, they can turn right back around with Derek Carr and Cooper and Crabtree and score. So the Titans defense hasn't looked that great either. And with their offense not really having put it together, I think they, get it together here at home versus the Oakland defense. So any type of game stack you can think of here, I think is totally in play. I think this is a sneaky game to really shoot out and go over the 47 over-under. I'm liking a lot of plays on both sides of the ball. Delaney Walker, last year in this matchup, caught 6 balls for 91 yards. He had a touchdown and gated in this matchup, so it would have been an even bigger day. So just about anyone and everyone's been playing this game. I like this game a lot.
Yeah, there should be a lot to go around, especially with the over-under being 47. It's one of the higher ones on the slate, and it being a pick'em. That means typically Vegas thinks it's going to be really close, so there should be a lot of passing going around. Should be spreading the ball around to a lot of people on both sides of the ball. So, as you mentioned, for tournament standpoint, a game stack might not be a bad idea here.
Yeah, one sneaky stack for tournaments I kind of like is DeMarco Murray. Actually, it's only 2 game sample size, but he's tied with just a few other people, but he leads the NFL in receptions out of the backfield so far. He's tied with a few other people, but 72 receptions out of the backfield. 12 receptions out of the backfield. Maybe a lower-owned Mariota, Murray, and Sharp stack could be something for your tournaments.
Yeah, exactly. That's where a lot of Murray's been getting his values from the passing game.
They're targeting him in the red zone as well.
Yeah, could be good opportunity there. All right, so that was a good game. Let's move on to another game here. We have Arizona going into Buffalo. Arizona's favored 4 on the road, and we have an over-under of 47. So I don't know what you think about the Buffalo side of the ball, but I do see some good plays here on the Arizona side of the ball. What do you think about David Johnson and his performance as of late?
Well, Buffalo is kind of frustrating because even though they're only allowing about 3.3 yards per carry through the first 2 weeks, they are allowing a lot of plays just due to their offense's inability to stay on the field. So their defense is giving up a lot of plays and staying on the field and getting gassed. I know you saw last Thursday night before last, you saw Matt Forte torch him for 3 touchdowns, but he did so on 31 carries, 102 yards and 3 touchdowns, only 3.3 yards per carry. And then you had Tampa's running backs only had 143 yards on 32 carries. So onto New England and Tampa. Sorry. So it's been kind of a volume standpoint to where they're not giving up a whole lot of yards per carry, but just based on pure volume that running backs are finally getting one over them. And I think they face their most challenging task here in Dennis Johnson, who seems to be matchup proof against a stout New England and Tampa D. He ran for 132 yards against New England, 143 yards from scrimmage against Tampa. So this guy, I mean, he seems to be uncontainable by any defense. So with Arizona being favored on the road and him being able to be targeted out of the backfield, I think he's squarely in play in all formats.
Yeah. Another guy I haven't really heard too much talk about this week, but I actually really like in this matchup is Larry Fitzgerald. The Bills are giving up the 3rd most fantasy points to wide receiver. He has 21 targets so far. He leads the NFL in red zone targets. And from a matchup standpoint, he's got a ton of hype going over. Is it Roby? I think he's going to be on this week. So, I think a lot of people remember Fitz in the last half of last year where he did not have a good second half. He did have a great first half. And, I think he just could be in for another good opportunity here. Is there something I'm missing, or is Fitz on?
You had I had everything there in my notes. Fitz 6'3", 220. Roby 5'7", 169. Fitz leads NFL in red zone targets. 21 targets, leads NFL. The only thing that you didn't hit on is through the slot, week 1, they allowed 391-1 to Wallace, and week 2, 126-1 to Decker. So Nickel Roby has been getting torched by Wallace and Decker so far. Fitz Palmer, DJ, any way you can think to stack up those 3, and maybe even throw a Michael Floyd in there, who is second on the team for 13 in targets. I think is also could be lower owned for tournaments.
Yeah, I agree. And as I mentioned, there's some other names that we'll talk about that are getting a lot of the attention, and for whatever reason, I don't see if it's getting much attention this week. So could be a potential lower owned individual here. So maybe something to look at for your tournaments. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the next game here. We have Baltimore going to Jacksonville. Baltimore favored 1 on the road, and we have 47 over under. Let's see. As far as the Baltimore side of the ball, Flacco's been all right this year. Is Flacco someone you might be considering this week?
Yeah, the Jaguars are what's known as one of those funnel defenses. Their run defense the past few years has been pretty stout, and it's no different this year. They've been pretty stingy against the run, but they've allowed Aaron Rodgers to finish QB6 and Phillip Rivers to throw 4 touchdown passes in 2 games. So they have a lot of injuries on the side of the ball. Devon House doesn't seem to be where he's going to be playing this week. Prince Amukamara is hurt, so we're looking at Flacco, who's without an established running game. They got a back carousel in the backfield with Terrence West and Justin Forsett. They seem to be letting Flacco kind of air it out to Dennis Pitta, who has 16 targets, Steve Smith 15, but on the most efficient of 12 targets seems to be Mike Wallace, who's caught the most of Flacco's touchdowns. So with them being stingy against the run and Baltimore not really having an established run game, I think Flacco sets up to be in a good spot here. In a sneaky shootout game as well. Another 47 over under, but both these sides could go back and forth.
Yes, it definitely with a 1 point favorite in Baltimore, it definitely can be a shootout here. Yeah, and it's really interesting. I think that Pitta, like you mentioned, he's getting the receptions and Wallace is getting the yards. So Pitta has 16 targets, as you mentioned, and this got 25% of the receptions they have so far this year. Wallace has gotten all the points for the long yardage and touchdowns, but yeah, should be in for a pretty interesting play there.
Little known fact: in real life, Joe Flacco and Dennis Pitta are actually best friends. So
right.
A little narrative streak for you guys. I don't know if you all buy into all that, but they room together in training camp and they hang out and do whatever they do on weekends. So
it's worked in the past for Romo and Witten. I mean,
yep, that's
there's
another
something there.
Yep.
Yeah. Let's go over to the Jacksonville side of the ball. This should be Ivory's first game back. Is what I'm thinking, what I'm seeing. Hopefully he'll be back. Don't want to play Yeldon. But what do we think about Allen Robinson? He's somebody that everyone loved coming in this year. Has not really had a great start to the season, but he's still got 20 targets on the season. So Bortles is trying to get him the ball.
Yeah, he's trying to get him the ball, but he hadn't had good matchups in the first 2 weeks. He's faced two tough cornerbacks and doesn't really get any better here. He's going to face Jimmy Smith, who in the first part of last year was everyone's post-Toasties cover boy of let's target Jimmy. Let's see if he can convert. But since week 9 of last year, he has not allowed a wide receiver 1 to go over to finish over wide receiver 20 since fantasy wide receiver 20 since week 9 of last year. So week 1 he checked Sammy Watkins for only 4 catches, 43 yards. And then last week, not really saying a whole lot, but he checked Terrell Pryor for only 3 receptions and 32 yards. So it's not the greatest matchup for A-Rob, but A-Rob's still tall enough, fast enough, and talented that he can get over on Jimmy here. So I don't really look for him for cash games as far as a low-owned tournament play. I think Bortles A-Rob stack is squarely in play.
Agree with you there. What do you think about Julius Thomas?
Yeah, this is kind of a sneaky spot. The Ravens linebackers in the past have been really good against covering tight ends, but last week I think they let Gates in for a touchdown. I forget. I had his stats written down from last week. I seem to have lost those, but this sets up for a good spot for Julius Thomas. I think inside the red zone, Bortles is trying to feed him more this year than they were last year. So I think he's squarely in play for tournaments.
Yeah, I agree with you there as well. All right, let's move on to the next game we have here. We got Cleveland going into Miami. Miami is favored by 9.5. We have a low over/under of 42. So this is probably one of the more chalkier games out there. A lot of talk about this game. Obviously, Vegas is not projecting Cleveland to score many points at all. So let's just talk about Cleveland just for a second. They're down to the third string quarterback. They don't have a number 1 receiver. As you mentioned, Pryor is probably the best receiver they have right now. It's not saying a whole lot. There's nothing we can do with Cleveland, right? There's not even a GPP play, right? There's nothing we're considering.
No.
Yeah.
That's what my notes say here.
No.
It's got a big red no from Cleveland.
Yeah, so let's not waste any more time on that. But the Miami side of the ball, this is where the chalk is. This is where everyone is trying to find some goodness here, some gold. Tannehill's been lighting it up quite a bit. Browns, have basically been averaging about 15 points per game, giving up to the quarterbacks. Tannehill, I think one people kind of forget about is he can run. I think people are always mentioning he used to be a wide receiver. Yes, we all know that. But last week he ran for 35 yards, so he's got that in him as well. But what do you think about Tannehill this week? Is he at the top of your list?
Yeah, I'm all in on Ryan Tannehill. Probably maybe a bad thing to be, but I liked him in the past. I had him in season long last year. I just picked him up this week to stream in this matchup here. And you mentioned his running upside, 35 yards last week. He had 5 rushes for 17 yards and a touchdown week 1. So they're trying to get in 6 rushes. So they're trying to get him involved in the running game. They're letting him kind of spread his wings, so to speak. But what's really sneaky, if we can go back to the Browns side of the ball here for a second and talk about their defense, they're also another funnel defense. A lot of people say, "Well, yeah, the Browns suck. You can just run on them. Why would I play Tannehill? They're going to be leading. What's going to keep them? What's going to keep the Dolphins passing the ball?" Well, in the first couple weeks, they limited the Browns defense limited the Eagles and Ravens, both offenses, on 57 carries to only 211 yards and 1 touchdown. That's to the tune of 3.7 yards per carry for the first 2 weeks, while they've allowed Carson Wentz, a rookie. He was the overall QB 12 in week 1. And then last week they allowed over 300 yards and 2 touchdowns to Joe Flacco in week 2. So were they Philadelphia in week 1 has a lot better of a running game and more established offensive line than Miami has here, who they'll be missing Arian Foster, and their offensive line is kind of sad, so to speak. This sets up for kind of a really good funnel spot. If the Dolphins are going to win and they're favored by 10, it looks like to me they're going to have to do it on the arms and legs of Ryan Tannehill.
Yeah, definitely. And with that being said, I think these wide receivers for Miami kind of set up to be pretty well. There's quite a bit of stats on Landry for this game, so I'll let you take the glory with this one. There's quite a bit there for Landry.
Yeah, Landry 13 targets. He's averaging 13 targets so far. In week 1, Landry runs most of his routes in the slot. In week 1, the Browns allowed Jordan Matthews 7 catches for 114 yards and a touchdown. And then in week 2, the Ravens tight ends, they don't really have a committed slot wide receiver, but the Ravens tight ends, 10 catches for 124 yards and a touchdown. So we're looking at double-digit targets and 6 straight for Landry. And he gets the Browns slot cornerback Tramon Williams. Man, this dude, 33 years old, slow. Landry looks like he's just set up in a prime spot to just eat. I mean, Tannehill's going to look to him quickly all day. I think typically we reserve Landry for PPR only plays on a site like DraftKings, but even on FanDuel at a price of $7K, I think Landry here he's a must for cash games tournaments. I'm finding any and every which way I can to stack this game for cash in tournaments. Excuse me, this team.
With you. Yeah. I know some people were a little concerned with Parker being back. Parker had a really good game last week, but Landry actually, since Parker has been on the team, basically, Landry's averaging 8 receptions and 91 yards with Parker in the lineup. So, even with that, he's averaging some pretty decent games. So I'm not concerned about that. I also like Parker for this matchup as well. So, are you on Parker at all this week as well?
Yeah, we just saw today that Joe Hayden missed practice, who he was supposed to be lined up against Parker. So I thought this was going to be set up for just a strictly funnel spot for Landry, where Tannehill would have to look off Parker. But it seems to be where if Hayden misses, then Parker also had 13 targets, and Parker was on the field last week, his first game back, for 91% of the snaps. The Dolphins ran 3 wide, 91% of the snaps, and Parker was out there for all of them. On the outside, week 1, they allowed Nelson Aguilar to catch for 4 passes, 57 yards and a touchdown. And then I've already spoke about Mike Wallace, 4 passes for 41 yards and 2 touchdowns in week 2. So, I mean, just fire them up, man. Parker, Landry, Tannehill, let them go.
Yeah, I agree with you. And then the last spot here that I think is probably going to be really chalky is the Dolphins defense. And it's really not much to say there. I mean, you've got the Browns, like I said, they're on their 3rd string quarterback. They're on their 3rd string wide receiver. So There's really not a lot of production to be made on the Cleveland side of the ball. So
Poor Cleveland, man. They can't catch a break.
Yeah, exactly. Dolphins definitely a great play for defense here this week.
One last thing. Another narrative streak here for you is Jordan Cameron against his old team.
Oh.
Jordan Cameron, narrative streak. He's only been in for 57% of the snaps the last couple weeks, but last season the Browns allowed an NFL high 17 catches, 193 yards to tight ends. Through the first 2 weeks of this season, 17 catches, 193 yards. So, there's another piece of the puzzle you can throw in your Miami Dolphins stack.
Yeah, so for you tournament guys out there, anybody and everyone from Miami is in play here.
Absolutely.
All right, let's move on to another game here. We got Washington going into New York to face the Giants. Giants are favored by 3.5, and we have an over/under of 46. So last week, the Giants were the chalk, going against the Saints, and it's pretty amazing what Manning did to be able to throw for as many yards as he did and not throw a touchdown.
Real interesting stat. Since the merger of the NFL AFL, there's only been 3 quarterbacks to throw for over 300 yards with a 78% or more completion rate and not throw for a touchdown. Only 3 quarterbacks. One of the other ones was Eli Manning in another spot.
He's done it before.
Yeah. So he's been here, done that before. So, but for him to be two out of the 3 times to accomplish this feat is pretty amazing. But either way, you look back and you can say, well, at least the process was there. It was just pure variance that wasn't on our side.
Yeah, and I guess to help matters a little bit, there was a touchdown pass to Beckham, and he just dropped it. So, could have been
another one to Larry Donnell.
Yeah, could have been a real good game for both sides. But where I was going with that is that do we think that Manning going against this Washington defense, is there anything that scares you away from maybe going back to Manning at this point? Against this Washington defense.
No, I hope a lot of people are sour and burnt on the taste, of Eli last week, because this is a great spot for Eli to bounce back. Week 1, they allowed 300 yards and 3 touchdowns to Big Ben. And then Dak Prescott, a rookie, they allowed him to complete each completion was for 9.8 yards per attempt. He had a 78% completion rate. For 9.7 yards per average attempt. So if they can allow that to Big Ben and to Dak, this is setting up for a good spot because they aren't that great against the run in between the tackles. They're allowing a little bit under 5 yards per carry in between the tackles. But with Rashad Jennings and the New York Giants running game not being able to get it together, this is a good spot for Eli to let it fly, being 4.5 home favorites.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And another thing, I'm hoping that people will be off of Beckham off this game as well, just because of his performance for last week and not putting up the numbers I think everybody's expecting him to. But as you mentioned, the Redskins defense gave up quite a bit to the quarterbacks. They also gave up quite a bit to number 1 receivers. In week 1, they gave up 8 receptions, 126 yards, and 2 touchdowns to Antonio Brown. Last week, they gave up 7 receptions, 102 yards to Des Bryant. So they're definitely giving up the points to the number 1 receiver. And I know people are quite concerned with Josh Norman. But in the last matchup against Josh Norman, Beckham was 6 receptions, 76 yards, and a touchdown. So he's been able to match up with him in the past, so I don't see why it'd be any different on this game here.
Yeah, it's kind of weird what the Redskins were doing, paying this guy so much money to come over and be their shutdown corner and not using him to shadow guys in weeks 1 and 2, and letting Bashaud Breeland isn't that bad, in his own right, but he's not really a number one corner cover guy. He's definitely able to hold his own right against opposing teams' number twos. But Big Ben and Dez burned him in weeks 1 and 2. So with Norman, the shadow OBJ, I think this is a great spot to look over the slot, over the middle, where the Redskins linebackers and slot cornerbacks allowed Eli Rogers to go for 6 catches, 60 yards, and a touchdown. And last week they allowed Beasley to go for 6 catches and 75 yards. And Jason Witten had quite a few targets and yardage over the middle as well from Dak Prescott. So the Giants slot guy, rookie Shepard, like you were talking about, something impressive about him is he's caught all of his targets except 1 so far this year. So this is just lining up to be a spot for him to be looked to for Eli early and often, and just be the way of moving the chains for Shepard. I'm really trying to talk myself into playing him in cash.
Yeah, the savings are there, and he's got 11 receptions from the slot, and as you mentioned, that's a great matchup. Over the middle, and he's going to be in a good position here this week as well. So, I think it's something good to look at, and definitely I'm going to look at him in tournaments. Like you mentioned, he's got the salary savings there for cash as well, something to look at. Let's see, real quickly, just touch on. It looks like Jennings is probably going to play. It seems like as of a couple hours ago, from what I read, seems like he's probably going to play. But if for some reason he's not, Vereen could be a decent play on DK just because of the salary savings and the PPR opportunities. So just kind of watch out for that a little bit and see what you can see as we get closer, if there's any clarification on Jennings playing or not. But just something to think about. But on the Redskins side of the ball, what do you like here? Is Kirk Cousins in play at all, or is there any other players that you're kind of looking at for the Redskins?
Yeah, I think this is a sneaky good spot for Kirk Cousins to kind of get right. With the Giants being so good up front and against the run. Washington, the Redskins don't really have that great of a run game, but their offensive line has been able to give Cousins some time to throw. He's only been pressured in 14% of his dropbacks so far this season, so he's had plenty of time to look downfield. I just think their offense kind of seems out of sync. He's been going through his progressions, and he just kind of looks lost, which has led to him getting hurried quite a bit, even though nobody's really getting to him. He's just giving the defense too much time. But I think this week they're going to go back to their bread and butter, and that is Cousins to Jordan Reed. We all know that the Giants have been the second worst in the NFL against tight ends in the last 2 years. They allowed week 1, they allowed Jason Witten for 10 receptions, 87 yards. And last year in this matchup, both times, Reed went for 6 catches, 96 yards, and for 8 catches, 98 yards. And one of those he had a touchdown called back. So this is a beautiful get right spot for Kirk Cousins and Jordan Reed. I hope these guys are lower owned. And one sneaky play, other than Reed, who's probably my tight end 1 on the week, is Jamison Crowder. Jamison Crowder has tied Jordan Reed on the team for 18 targets apiece. And he's been on the field for 73% of the snaps. So I think with D-Jax being kind of hindered in practice this week, he's already been cleared and said he's going to play. But with him being kind of hindered, I think this is a sneaky spot for Jamison Crowder and Jordan Reed over the middle, where the Giants are most vulnerable.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Crowder's definitely a name that's not being talked about much at all. He's kind of worked his way into that wide receiver 2 spot, overtaking Garcon. And with D-Jax being somewhat hindered, he could be in for a good matchup here as well. And then you mentioned the stat about Witten. They gave up 87 yards to Witten in week 1. They also gave up 65 yards to Bailey as well.
It's true.
Beasley.
So that's looking like the just a replay of Witten Beasley could be Reed and Crowder.
Exactly. So yeah, that's a real good call there, Pat. I think that's very interesting for this week.
You write that down.
Write that down. All right, let's move on to another game here. Trying to get through these games. We have Detroit going to Green Bay. Green Bay is favored by 7 and 47 over under. So Aaron Rodgers has not been the best these first 2 weeks, but we all know that Aaron Rodgers plays out of his mind at home. So are you looking at Aaron Rodgers' way this week against this Detroit defense?
Man, I'll tell you what. This was when I first looked at the week after watching Rodgers get embarrassed on the road in Minnesota. When I first looked at this slate, I was like, man, I just want to go all in on Aaron Rodgers in this spot.
Yeah,
I've kind of, I don't know. I'm kind of iffy on it now. What do you think?
Well, I mean, just one stat to just kind of put out there. He's got a 42 to 4 touchdown interception ratio at home. I mean,
Yeah.
that's how much better he plays at home. So and also to the Lions are giving up the second most fantasy points to quarterbacks. So
Yeah, man. In week 1, Andrew Luck was the overall QB1, and then last week, I don't know if any of you guys watched the Titans. I played Mariota and Cash last week on DK, so I was very interested in watching the Titans on the road at Detroit. And the Titans, man, their offense looked out of sync, kind of lost there. So they weren't even playing that great, and even so, they allowed for Mariota to throw for 250 yards and 2 touchdowns. So on the road here at Lambeau Field, a lot of people worried about Rodgers and Jordy Nelson, saying they look out of sync. But I saw some glimpses of hope where Rodgers didn't even have to look, where he was throwing. He just knew where Jordy was going to be, and he hit him in stride a few times early in the first half. So I think it might be maybe a conditioning thing with Jordy, just kind of getting back up to game speed. But he has 20 targets so far. He will be going against Darius Slay, which is a tough matchup. But I think that this is one where Jordy Nelson can beat, because he's hit pay dirt in this matchup before. I think he's a good spot to get right here at home in this matchup.
Yeah, definitely agree with you there. So if we're liking Rodgers, he's got to throw it to somebody. So Nelson could be in for a good one here. Are you looking at Cobb or Cook at all in this matchup?
Yeah, with Slade being on Nelson and Nelson being kind of pricey on the sites, Quandre Diggs will be lined up with Cobb. Diggs he's kind of underrated. He's not that great. He's not that good either. But in this matchup in the past, he's held Cobb to only 5 receptions, 53, and 4 receptions, 29 last 2 years. I'm just not really thrilled with the way they're using Cobb as a running back out of the backfield. But one spot here that Detroit is vulnerable is over the middle. Through 2 weeks, they've allowed the most receptions, the most touchdowns, and the most yardage to tight ends through the first 2 weeks of the year. So, Jared Cook.
Yeah. Hasn't been all right. Duck. Make sure no one's throwing his shoes at you or anything. But yeah, he hasn't been all that great this year. But I mean, Lions have just been giving it up to tight ends. So he could be in for a good game here. Something to look at maybe in your tournaments.
Yeah. One good note for Cook is week 1 he was only in for 49% of the snaps. Last week in Minnesota, he was in for 64% of the snaps. His targets jumped from 2 in week 1 to 6 targets last week in week 2. So with all the other Green Bay passing attack options and Nelson being covered by Slay and Cobb by Diggs, this is a get right spot for Cook. I'll definitely have some Rodgers, Cook, Cobb, some Rodgers, Cook, Nelson stacks in my tournaments.
I'm there with you. Let's move to the other side of the ball, though. I think there's some decent plays here. There should be some offense on the Detroit side of the ball. Should be some scoring going on. Question is, where is it going to go? And Marvin Jones is kind of propelled himself into that number one spot. I mean, he's seen 21 targets so far this year. So, what do you think about him in this matchup?
Man, I love him here. This is going to be a spot where Detroit's going to be playing from behind. They're going to be throwing a lot. He's going to be lined up against Packers left cornerback Demarius Randall, who has been burnt in weeks 1 and 2 so far. Diggs just made him his poster boy on Sunday Night Football last week, running all over the field. I don't think Jones is nearly as talented as Diggs, but I think with his pure volume and the rapport he's established with Stafford so far this season, I think that Marvin Jones is a great player here in cash and in tournaments.
Yeah, they're with you. One guy that I'm interested to hear your thoughts on is Ebron. I have some decent stats here for him, but I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on him because he's had somewhat of an up and down season as well. But I don't know. What's your thoughts? Could he be in for a good game here and a good matchup?
Yeah, I think so. What do you got?
Well, I mean, I know the Packers have given up the 4th most points to tight ends so far. Ebron's been in on 90% of the snaps, so he's virtually there the entire time. And the Packers have given up a touchdown every game so far. So you mentioned they're giving the ball up over the middle, so this could be a good spot, a good scenario for Ebron. And as you mentioned with Stafford, they're going to have to throw the ball a lot. So he could be somebody that could increase his looks, increase his targets, and could pay off.
Yeah, I think he'll definitely be lower owned because he's right around that tight end price point of some of the other more popular tight ends this week. We'll talk about later, but yeah, I think that's a good sneaky spot. I'm not too really interested in Golden Tate with his ADOT average depth of target only being around 6 to 7 yards, whereas Marvin Jones, they've been targeted 10 to 15 yards down the field. They've been targeting Marvin Jones everywhere. And to add to your point, last week, Sunday Night Football, they allowed Kyle Rudolph to go for 331 and 1. And then in week 1, they allowed Julius Thomas for 7, 112 and 1. So, that's a good sneaky call there with Eric Ebron. I like that. I like that call a lot.
Yeah, and I like what you mentioned about Tate too, as far as ADOT. The one thing I will say about that is just something for you guys to think about in tournaments. He's going to be low owned. Everyone is off of Tate at this point. Coming into the season, I think a lot of people were on him thinking he's the number one receiver. And as we mentioned, Jones is overtaking that spot. Everyone is off of Tate. He's priced kind of high, but this is a scenario where Stafford's going to be having to pass the ball the entire game. So, maybe think about a couple shares of him in tournaments because it could be a scenario where he does go off and has that makake game for everything.
Oh, yeah. That's a good point. Another interesting note I'm just reading here is Sam Shields, Green Bay's number one corner guy. He had a concussion last Sunday night.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
So he'll be out for this game. So we're looking at who are we looking at? Quandre Diggs being as their number one corner guy. So this is a good spot.
Yep. All right. So that's definitely a good game to target here. Let's move on to another game. We have Minnesota going into Carolina. Carolina's favored by 7, and we have an over/under of 43. So I think Minnesota kind of surprised some people this last week, especially with the performance of Stephon Diggs. But going into Carolina, I don't know so much. Is there anything you like Minnesota at all this week?
Man, I really like Stephon Diggs.
Yeah.
I'm trying to talk myself into playing him in cash.
Yeah, I mean, God, I looked at his salary today and I had to take a double take. It's still so low.
He leads the NFL in receiving. He's only 5,100 on DK. He's only 6,400 on FanDuel. Last week he had 11 targets under Sam Bradford, 285 yards in 2 weeks. Without Adrian Peterson, I mean, how else are they going to move the ball but through Diggs?
Yeah.
He'll run most of his routes against a rookie left cornerback in James Bradbury. He's a second-round pick out of small school Samford. He'll see some routes against Burnable slot cornerback Robert McClain, who their only experienced secondary back is Ben Benwickery. McClain is the Panthers' weakest cover man, and he covers the slot mostly when James Bradbury doesn't. And they move Diggs all around. So any of these three guys, I don't see Diggs having problems, getting open against these guys. And this sets up to be, where the Panthers, Cam Newton and Panthers at home are averaging 31 points a game at home in the last 2 seasons. So this is a spot without a run game. The Vikings will be behind. So this is another pure volume spot for Diggs. Like I'm having trouble not playing this guy in everything.
Yeah, another thing that's tough is, if you go back, say last season, Pat, how many times have we played Jordan Matthews lined up with Bradford, and he'd go for 8-9 receptions, 120, 130 yards, and a touchdown. So, Bradford can definitely lock in on a receiver. Yeah, most of the time it was in garbage time, but it doesn't really bother me so much here. Could be another scenario where it is garbage time and Diggs is just getting a ton of catches again. So, yeah, I'm with you there. I keep going back and forth because Carolina is so good, but Diggs has been pretty awesome, and he's so low priced.
Well, you saw last week that Carolina never took their foot off the gas pedal, but they did let San Francisco kind of get back into it here and there. So if they can let some production on the offensive side of the ball from a offense like the sorry, no offense, Marty, but the 49ers. I mean, we saw what Minnesota was able to do against a decent defense in Green Bay at home last week. I think they've got a little confidence here, and Bradford and Diggs have kind of established a little routine here.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Let's go over to the Carolina side of the ball. Man, Newton and Benjamin has been looking awesome these first 2 games.
Yeah, bro.
I think one thing that people maybe aren't realizing as much is Minnesota's actually been pretty good on the defensive side of the ball. So does that scare you away from maybe considering Newton or Benjamin this week?
No, not at all. Their one and only weakness is right cornerback Trey Waynes, who is Pro Football Focus 38. He's graded out as a 38 out of 114 cornerback. He stands only 6 foot 190. Whereas Kelvin Benjamin is 6'5", 245. Benjamin grades out at a 83 overall, according to Pro Football Focus. So the one bright spot for Carolina happens to be Cam Newton's favorite target throughout the first 2 weeks of the NFL season.
Yeah, no, very true. Very true there. Yeah, I mean, I think that just what they've been able to do so far, I think that this isn't really a matchup that I'm too concerned about. We'll kind of see how the only thing for me is I think that there's probably some better plays out there, but definitely
with you saying that, I have a question for you. Do you think that like a Newton Benjamin stack is going to go lower owned since this game has got a lower total and Minnesota did such a good job last week? What do you think?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think for tournaments, it's something to consider because it will be low owned. I don't foresee a lot of people on this game, especially when there's some other games like the Miami game, Packers. I think those players might be a little bit higher owned this week.
Well, check this out. In weeks 1, Vikings on the road allowed Tajay Sharp to go for 7 receptions, 76 yards. Last week, Jordy Nelson, 5 receptions, 73 yards, and a touchdown. So, Xavier Rhodes could be back this week.
I think that's going to be key.
Yeah, so stay tuned to see if he's back. If not, then you'll definitely see Benjamin lined up against Trey Waynes, who I think he can just have his way with all game. Also, over the middle, Minnesota has been pretty stingy against tight ends, but we're talking about Cam Newton and Greg Olsen here. So that duo has been able to beat any defense over the last year or so. So I think I'll definitely have some exposure to this game in tournaments because with it being such a low total, I think people will be off, and with these being two good defenses, people will be off. So,
yeah, I agree with you. And as you mentioned, Carolina, didn't let their foot off the pedal. They just kept going last week. So, no stopping them. Panthers D, I think, also could be in a decent spot here as well. I think Diggs is really the only thing that concerns me from the Minnesota side of the ball, especially with no AP. They're going to have to figure out what to do that run game. It's going to be tough to figure that out against the Panthers.
Yeah, a few season-long guys that fought to pick up McKinnon and Asiata. Good luck the next few weeks.
Yeah, you don't want to play them this week.
No.
Check back in another week or so. All right, let's move on to the next game here. We have the San Francisco 49ers taking on the Seattle Seahawks. Seattle is at home, and they're shockingly favored by 9.5. I don't get that. I was fully expecting the Niners to go 16-0 this season. Niners beat the Rams. Rams beat the Seahawks, so they should be in a shoe-in to win this game.
Right.
But we have another low over/under 41.5. Big thing here, Seattle is a whole different ball club when they're playing at home. So definitely can see that. And San Francisco as well is a whole different ball club on the road.
Yes.
I thought I'd be able to remember all the stats here, but they're just horrible on the road. So I don't know if you have any of those stats there.
Yeah, 49ers only allowing 15 points average at home, whereas they're allowing 33 points on the road. Chip Kelly's defenses are allowing the most plays to opposing offenses, the most rushing plays to opposing offenses. Russell Wilson, who seems to be getting a little healthier due to his high ankle sprain, he is a little bit worrisome. He was also in my consideration as cash game QBs when I first looked at the slate, but then I remembered he's hindered with an ankle sprain. So you got to kind of stay tuned to Twitter and the news updates there to see what's going on with him. But he is not. He's yet to have a top 15 fantasy quarterback outing through two games where the 49ers allowed number one overall fantasy quarterback Cam Newton last week. So Wilson, if there ever was a week for him to bounce back, it's going to be right here against the 49ers, who are allowing 33 points per game on the road and the most offensive plays per offense to the opposing offenses.
Yeah, I agree with you there. One of the things that's kind of popped up pretty much today has been a little more interesting. Looks as though Thomas Rawls will not play in this game. That's where everyone's heading, and that Christine Michael will get a lion's share of the carries. Niners gave up 131 yards to Fozzie Whitaker last week. So, Michael, again, in this scenario where he's pretty much the only guy, even Procise, he's got a broken hand or something.
Procise has a broken hand. We got Rawls with his ankle still. So you're looking at Michael, who sets up to just be handing the volume. Where you said they allowed last week to Panthers running backs Cameron Arts-Payne and Fozzie Whitaker. Fozzie Whitaker had 16 carries for 100 yards last week. So, and then Cameron Arts-Payne had 14 for another 34 yards. 4.47 yards per carry. They're allowing the most running attempts per game to opposing offenses. They lost their only decent run-stopping linebacker in Ray Armstrong. He tore his pectoral last week against Carolina. So without Ray, C-Mike's matchup is even better this week. So welcome to the chalk, my friend.
Yeah, I think everyone's lineups pretty much just changed today, trying to figure out a way to put Michael in there, and he's probably going from like 1 or 2% to own.
His price. Let me ask you something. His price is kind of up there on FanDuel. What do you think about his price on FanDuel? $6,900.
Yeah, it was more than I was kind of expecting when I looked at it today. I think there's just some carryover from the previous weeks, but the thing is, as we mentioned, if he's 6,900, you basically are going to want to try and get at least 14 points out of him. And with the yardage that they gave up last time, just the Panthers and Fozzie Whitaker and Cameron Artis-Payne, I mean, that was 131 yards. That's big. That's 13 points right there. If he can score a touchdown, definitely puts you over. If he catches any balls, that's going to put you over as well. So it's definitely doable. So I think it's something to consider. I think on DK though, I think that's probably where he'll be utilized quite a bit more.
Yeah, I think he's 5K over there.
Yeah. So definitely something to look at. I mean, make sure that Rawls is out. Everything kind of sees it's pointing that he'll be out, but if for some reason he's in, then this changes everything.
Yep.
All right, let's go and move on to the next game here. We have the Los Angeles Rams going to Tampa Bay. We have Tampa Bay favored 5.5 at home, and we have yet again another low over/under 42. Yeah, I was trying to pick out something on this LA side of the ball to really talk about, and I don't really love much at all. The only thing that was really interesting to even point out to me was Tavon Austin has 21 targets. Really hasn't done anything with those targets. So,
no.
Is there anything you like on the Rams side?
Maybe some positive regression for Tavon, maybe, just because the Rams, forte is running the ball. Well, the Bucs' defensive forte is stopping the run. So this actually sets up for a good spot for the Buccaneers' defense.
Mm-hmm.
If they're gonna stuff Todd Gurley, who hasn't been able to get anything going yet so far this year, then and they're going to force Case Keenum to pass, then this is a good funnel spot for the Bucs defense, with them being number 9 in run defense in DVOA last season. They've held the Falcons and Cardinals running backs to a combined 143 yards and 1 touchdown on 50 carries in 2 weeks, only 2.98 yards per carry so far in 2 games. And Todd Gurley is ranked 40th among running backs so far this year. And when he gets into space among passing targets, and 25th in rushing yards, despite him being number 9 overall in carries with 36 carries. So,
right.
Rest in peace, season-long Todd Gurley owners this week. You have to wait another week for him to get going. I'm kind of thinking that the Buccaneers defense, around the industry, they're priced right there with the Dolphins defense we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
I think for tournaments and even for cash games, this could be a nice pivot.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Everyone's going to go down and see the Dolphins D and try and plug that in, but Bucs is definitely one in this scenario that I think is going to go way under-owned. They could be in for a good matchup, definitely.
Absolutely. On the other side of the ball, the Rams, this is kind of a mirror. These 2 defenses are kind of mirror images of each other. The Rams defense has only been allowing 3.2 yards per carry to running backs. They only allowed 3.2 yards per carry in Week 1 to Seattle running backs, and then in Week 2, 2.79 yards per carry. So this is another good funnel spot for Jameis Winston to be forced to throw the ball without Doug Martin. So what do you think about, since Doug Martin is out with a hamstring, what do you think about Charles Sims in cash?
Yeah, I think I like it a little bit more for DK than I would FanDuel, just because of the PPR scenario. But again, another low price guy, allow you to spend up in other positions. I do think he's going to start. Prior to the news about Michael, I think he would have been a lot higher. I think now people might pivot over to Michael a little bit more, but I think he's in for a good scenario this week.
It's going to be real interesting to see where all these fill-in running backs fall in ownership, with them being so similarly priced. I think DK did a great job of pricing them up. Whereas Week 1 we had Christine Michael at around 3,500 in kind of a same spot. Now he's at 5K, and we have Sims here at 4,900 in a good PPR spot. So we said that the Rams are good against the run, so this might force Jameis to pass. And you have VJax. Man, have you gotten to watch any of the Buccaneers games so far?
Very sparingly. I've been watching my 49ers dominate. So,
yeah, VJax, bless his heart, he looks a little long in the tooth, man. He looks a little slow and slow out of the gate. I kind of feel for him. So Mike Evans is leading this team in targets by 12. Mike Evans, 24 targets, VJax 16 on the year. So I think this is a good spot for Mike Evans to just get fed over and over and over. And he has flashed some matchup proof in the last few years. Last week against Patrick Peterson, he went for 6 catches, 70 yards, and 1 touchdown against a great cover cornerback in Patrick Peterson. So this is a lot better spot for Mike Evans. So I think that he's going to go highly overlooked and under-owned in tournaments due to the low total and just overall unappealing matchup of this game.
Yeah, I really like Evans this week as well. Last time he faced the Rams, he went for 9 catches and 151 yards.
Yep.
It wasn't more of a they got behind and had to catch up a bit, but
yep.
He's the guy they're going to go to. And as you mentioned with VJax, there really isn't many other options. They just released Safarian Jenkins today, so
DUI
in trouble, and they're running out of people to throw it to. So Evans could get all the targets this week.
Absolutely.
All right, let's go to Pittsburgh going into Philadelphia. So this is the Pennsylvania game here. We got Pittsburgh favored 3.5 on the road, and we have 46.5 over under. Some pretty decent plays on both sides of the ball, but sadly, this will be the last week that we can use D'Angelo Williams with Le'Veon Bell coming back next week. So, what do you think? Is this a spot where we can use D-Will even with the high price, the salary that he has now?
Yeah, I think just another, based on pure volume alone, I think that he's squarely in play in every format.
Yeah, I mean, he leads the league in touches. He basically has a carry or a target on 59% of the snaps. I mean, he's involved in so much of what they do right now.
Yeah, he leads the NFL. He's got 87% of the Steelers' workload.
Yeah, it's unreal what he's doing right now, and to think that he's the backup.
68 touches, leads the NFL in 68 touches, and he leads the NFL in fantasy points through 2 weeks. Steelers being home favorites, they're 3-point favorites on the road. So this is a good game script for him. So with him just seeing so many passing attempts and touches out of the backfield, I mean, even at 7,500 on DK, full point PPR, I mean, his floor is just so high. And we've seen what he's done through 2 weeks in mediocre matchups. Here we get another bad to mediocre matchup again. I think, he's just in must-play territory.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And of course, we have Antonio Brown. Last week he did not have a great week. I don't want to say that it just resembled that he's human, because he's not human. It's just a fluke of a game there. Even with a bad game, he still has 22 targets on the season, so he's going to get his targets. Of course, he's going to be priced high, but never somebody that you want to count out and completely fade. But
yeah, he matches up against Nolan Carroll, who oh man, this is a great matchup for Antonio Brown. It's so tough, man, with just the pricing and everything out there this week. He could be easily be the wide receiver 1 on the week, easily.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And one of the guys I'm starting to like quite a bit is their tight end Jesse James. He's being involved in a lot of the snaps. He's basically in on every play, but he's blocking on a lot of them. So he's helping out Big Ben there. But when it comes to the red zone, he's getting his targets, and he's a big dude, so he's definitely a good target to target in the red zone. And the main thing about him is the sites haven't really increased his salary at all. He's close to minimum on both still. So, I definitely like Jesse James as a player. What do you think about the matchup here against Philadelphia, though?
Their cover linebackers are a little bit better against passing tight ends than he's had in the past. But like you said, with him being on the field for 100% of the snaps, he is blocking on a little over. I don't have the percentage in front of me. I can't seem to find it right now, but he is blocking on quite a bit of them. So that's the one downside to his game. But other than that, he is leading the Steelers in red zone targets. So for a minimum price tight end, you can ask more for that. Another downside to him is Marcus Wheaton is supposed to return this week. So look out for that news.
Yeah, that could change things. So we'll see.
But he is tied for second on the team in targets. Antonio Brown leads the team in 22 targets. Jesse James with 12 targets, and right behind it.
Quite a big gap there.
Yep.
All right, let's go to the Philly side of the ball. Jordan Matthews, man. Carson Wentz seems to just be in love with this dude. He got 23 targets on the season so far. Do you have any stats there? What he's done in the slot? How well he's been doing there?
Last week. Oh man, such bittersweet. Would have put us in the cash. He dropped a would-be 35-yard touchdown pass right before halftime against the Bears when they won last week. But his 23 targets, like you said, ranks second NFL. He owns 32% of the target share in this offense, ranks first in the NFL. This is a game where it sets up for Philly to be playing from behind. So this is a good negative game script for these guys to where they'll have to be throwing a lot, which should uptick in his projection, his target projection. So he'll be going up against their slot cornerback, Pittsburgh slot cornerback, and Sean Davis to cover the slot. Okay, they've given up 6 catches for 58 yards to the Redskins' Jamison Crowder in Week 1. Sean Davis did, and then in Week 2, little to no named Cincinnati Bengals slot wide receiver Tyler Boyd burnt Davis for 6 catches and 78 yards. So with Matthews running nearly 70% of his routes in the slot, this is a great spot for Matthews. The only downside to me wanting to play him in cash is, Carson Wentz on the road here. Oh, no, he's at home. They're at home, aren't they? Yeah. It's just them being, underdogs. So having a low total. Other than that, I mean, with him just being, such a high volume and a great matchup, I think he's going to go under-owned, and this would be a great game to stack with maybe a Big Ben and Jordan Matthews opposite stack.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, it's something that kind of worked out for you in the past, so that's something to look at. Yeah, and like you mentioned, as far as in the slot, Pittsburgh has given up 136 yards to the slot receiver so far this year, so yeah, it could be a great matchup for Jordan Matthews there. It
is, and another sneaky thing to note is Joel Green Beckham has increased his snap usage. He's up to where did I see it? 58. He was on 58% of snaps last week, where he's only in 30% of the snaps week 1, and they were targeting him in the red zone. And without Zach Ertz will be out again, so look for Trey Burton to get another shot at the tight end. We saw him have great success against the Bears in week 1. This really isn't a good matchup. They did contain Jordan Reed for only 6 catches and 64 yards in week 1, and they limited Bengals tight ends to only 44 yards in week 2 on 12 targets. So this isn't a good spot for Trey Burton, so maybe not for cash, but definitely for a tournament. I would look to Trey Burton as a price-saving option.
Agree with you there. Yeah, he's so cheap.
He's very cheap.
Yeah. All right, we got 4 games left to go over. We have Jets going into Kansas City. Kansas City favored by 3. Over under 42. real quickly, how amazing is Matt Forte, man? That dude, everyone said washed up. Bears cut him loose. He goes to the Jets and dude puts up over 30 carries last game, and most carries he's ever had in his career. So, what do you think about Forte in this matchup against the Chiefs?
Leading the NFL in fantasy points so far. Yeah, man. It's pretty miraculous. His usage is the third most in the NFL with 52 carries. He's got the eighth most running back targets with 10 targets out of the backfield. He's an RB1, despite this matchup is tough. It's kind of tough here against the Chiefs.
Well, Chiefs have actually have given up the most rushing yards per game so far, and the fifth most fantasy points to running backs. So
that's true.
I think that there's some injuries there that they probably should be graded out better than what they're playing at. But, still, I mean, I think that with his production so far and how they've been performing, this could be a good matchup for Forte there.
Yeah, another lower-owned sneaky option here because they look to shut down. It looks like Brandon Marshall he's been limited all week in practice, so he's supposed to play, but he's hindered with that hamstring injury. So I would look to Eric Decker and Forte to be the main producers out of this offense.
Yeah, and I kind of hope that Marshall does play just because I really like Decker this week.
Yeah.
And I think he's in a great matchup, and I kind of want the attention to be taken away from Decker. But dude, that dude has been so consistent as well.
He gets in the end zone every week.
In a touchdown in 18 straight games.
Yeah.
How do you not cash if somebody's doing that every week? So, are you on Decker this week as well?
Oh, absolutely. This is kind of a sneaky spot for the Jets pass catchers. Like I said, Marshall's status is kind of murky this week, but they've allowed in week one they allowed Keenan Allen to go for 663 before he tore his ACL, and then last week the Texans, Will Fuller went for 104, and DeAndre Hopkins 7 catches, 113 and 1. So, like you said, this is a lot better matchup than it used to be. Decker, who's 6'3", 217, will run most of his routes against a quite small Steven Nelson, who is only 5'10", 197, and he is one of Pro Football Focus's lower graded out corners on the year. So this is another spot where Decker should probably find the end zone.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I'm hoping for another one for Decker. Moving over to the other side of the ball, what do you think about Jeremy Maclin in this matchup against?
He's one of my favorite sneaky plays of the week. He should be going up against everyone's cover boy so far to target, and what used to be known, the artist formerly known as Revis Island. AJ Green whipped him for just whopping 12 catches, 180 yards, and a touchdown. And then last week in Thursday Night Football, Marquise Goodwin caught an 84-yard bomb. So we're looking at, last year Maclin runs a 4.340. So, he's fast enough, tall enough to get over on Revis here in this matchup.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I mean, Jets have been giving up the second most fantasy points to wide receivers so far this year, and unfortunately, I think Revis's best games are behind him. And
for sure,
I still think people will fade Maclin just for that reason, because of the name of Revis that he's going to go against. But signs point to it should be a decent game for Maclin, so I wouldn't just discard him just yet. So.
No, it's a good sneaky tournament option.
Yeah, agreed there. All right, let's go to San Diego, going to Indianapolis. Indy is favored by 1.5, and here's one of the higher over-unders we have at 51. So, man, some tough luck for the Chargers with Woodhead being out for the season, Allen being out for the season. yet they're still finding a way to make it happen. So who's going to make it happen for San Diego this week?
Everyone.
Next man up, right? Everyone just steps in and just makes it happen, right?
Yeah, with the Colts defense still being injury ridden and depleted as they are, looks like everyone should be able to have their way. I mean, you have like you said, Danny Woodhead out with the ACL tear, so in steps Melvin Gordon. He'll get a huge boost here. He'll be able to have the monopoly on this rushing game. The only thing that worries me is if they do get behind. They just signed Dexter McCluster, who already is familiar with Ken Whisenhunt's system back in Tennessee, and he's known to be a favorite of Ken Whisenhunt. So maybe if they do get behind, he could get put in. But they did allow this defense was pummeled by the Lions and Broncos running backs for 4.63 yards per carry combined, 51 carries, 270 yards, and 3 touchdowns in 2 weeks. They've allowed, get this, man, in only 2 games, all right, they've allowed 3 top 10 fantasy running backs in only 2 games, allowing over 5.5 yards per carry. Depending on game flow, Melvin Gordon already has 41 carries this year with 3 touchdowns. So this sets up for a beautiful spot for Melvin Gordon to just have his way against this defense.
Yeah, I think that's such an important stat you just said right there. 41 carries so far this year, and that's with Woodhead, the majority of the games. So, you mentioned McCluster could potentially take away something, but, I mean, when they had Woodhead, it still didn't stop him from having, a decent amount of carries. So
only 5,800 on DK, 7,100 on FanDuel. I just think you just play this guy, but it's going to be tough with the C Mike News and all the other guys. It's like, well, which value guys do you like most? Mm-hmm. So if you guys got your questions, want to hit me up on Twitter, just do so. We can chat it out and figure out which one of these values guys are in the best spot. But for me right now, Melvin Gordon's leading the pack against this bombed out and depleted defense of the Colts.
Yeah, they're with you. What about these Chargers wide receivers? We have Benjamin that's been having some great games. Now I'm drawing a blank on not Inman. Tyrell Williams has been having.
Yes, Tyrell Williams. Yep, he's in a good spot this week. The good thing about Benjamin though is he's caught 13 of 14 targets, where he's had the highest percentage of targets thrown his way. Shorter. He's perfect for Phillip Rivers because he runs those really fast crossing routes, real quick, just kind of like Keenan Allen did. But he also has the ability to take the top off of defenses. So he adds another dimension to the Chargers passing offense that Allen didn't. Whereas Allen was more of a possession receiver. I think kind of Benjamin's a little bit of both. He's also leading the team in 5 red zone targets since Keenan Allen went down. So I think just based on volume alone, without other options, I think Benjamin is in play for cash and tournaments. Yeah.
Now the only concern here is Vontae Davis going to be back, and if so, who do you think he might be on?
We still don't know if he is. He should be lined up with Benjamin, but we just don't know yet. He was right. He sat out practice today, so it's not looking too good.
Gotcha. Okay, something to monitor as the days go on, just to see what the status is of Vontae Davis. Again, that could change things if he's in. But let's go on to the Indy side of the ball. Well, there's a lot of passing options in this game. I don't think we're on Gore too much, but tell me what you think about this Indy passing offense against this Chargers defense.
Actually, I kind of want to talk about Frank Gore.
You're the one guy that wants to, so I'll let you have the floor there. So go ahead.
Yeah, in weeks 1 and 2, he has 18 and 16 touches respectively. He has the second most. The Chargers have allowed the second most fantasy points per rushing attempt so far. They've allowed 3 different backs to catch them 6 passes or more out of the backfield. Gore has been targeted for 12 times out of the backfield so far for Luck on checkdowns. They're a home favorite. So it's kind of a weakness on weakness spot here for both of these rushing offenses in Melvin Gordon and in the other side of the ball and Frank Gore, both in great matchups. I know he's older, but he's only 5,700 on FanDuel. He's priced lower than all of the Vikings' backup running backs. So
yeah, that's true.
And he scored a touchdown in the first 2 weeks. So I think this is a good spot for Frank Gore. But on the passing side of Indy's ball, they lost Dante Moncrief this week. It'll be interesting to see. A lot of people think that they'll move. T.Y. Hilton in the past ran 70% of his routes or 60% of his snaps in the slot. Logan Verrett, San Diego's number 1 shadow corner who has shut down opposing wide receiver ones, he rarely travels in the slot. So it'll be interesting to see if they, since Moncrief is out, if they'll move Hilton out wide to see if the Colts will become more of a one-dimensional team and have to play Dwayne Allen and Jack Doyle and become a 2 tight end team here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting about Hilton. I mean, I'd love Hilton if there was some way that we could get clarification on if Verrett's going to be on him or not. If for some reason Verrett's going to be on him, then I think it's actually an interesting play to pivot and go to Dorsett. Dorsett's a really fast receiver. He's been catching the long ball. He's moving the ball down the field, helping him out with that. So he could be interesting if that were to play out that way. But I think one of my more favorite plays, as you mentioned, is Dwayne Allen. He's been on 83% of the snaps, so he's there virtually at almost every play.
Yeah.
And the Chargers are giving up a lot of fantasy points to tight ends this year. So, with the one thing that they're going to miss the most about Moncrief is his size, especially when you talk in the red zone. Hilton and Dorsett are tiny receivers, whereas Allen's a big dude. So when you think about red zone targets, he could see an increase in red zone targets, maybe along with Doyle as well. But I kind of like Allen in this game. What do you think?
Yeah, one interesting stat on Allen is last season when they had Colby Fleener, Allen stayed in the block on 78% of his snaps. You said he was in on a lot of snaps this year. Well, he's only been blocking on 15% of his snaps this season. So he's been running routes on 85% of his snaps. So he's out there making himself available as a target. And like you said, he's one of the bigger targets who could be available in the red zone. And another sneaky option, like you said, would be Jack Doyle. Let's see, Allen is 6'3", 255, and then Moncrief was 6'2", 221. And you have T.Y. Hilton, who's only 5'10", and you have Dorsett, who's only 5'10". So if they get in the red zone, I think Luck would be looking to target Doyle, who is 6'6", or Dwayne Allen, who's 6'3", 255. The Chargers lost Eric Weddle last year. They gave up 8 catches for 94 yards to Travis Kelce in Week 1, and then last week to Antonio Gates. They gave up, Julius Thomas. They gave up 6 catches and 88 yards and a touchdown to Julius Thomas. So they also lost their strong safety who helped cover tight ends, Jahil Adai, to a collarbone injury. So this middle of the field, the Chargers cornerbacks are slow. They're old. They're backups. I think Allen is going to be the beneficiary of the Colts losing Dante Moncrief. So Allen may be my favorite tight end play on the week for cash and tournaments.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I love Allen this week. Definitely looking to see how we can use him.
One interesting stat is Doyle, after Moncrief went down, Doyle played 60% of the snaps. So at only 2,500 on DK, a great tournament pivot or a low price option for your tournaments in your game stack here.
Yeah, great point there.
And then we didn't discuss the injury news on the Charger side of the ball. Antonio Gates with a hamstring is not expected to play. So my man, I'm so pumped. Second round draft pick, Hunter Henry. Out of the
Where's he from?
University of Arkansas, Whoopig Suey. The nation's #1 overall tight end last year. Just a huge dude, great dude. He's a beast, man. I look for him to eat. I think the coaches are excited about him. Coaches are pumped about him. I think they're going to game plan him right away. We know Rivers loves his tight ends, so he's also min price, another low-owned option. I can't help playing this guy tomorrow in daily. I even picked him up in a few of my season-long leagues to plug him in where I needed a tie-in streamer. So
nice.
Let's go, Hunter.
All right, I'll have to look out for that. All right, next game we have Chicago going to Dallas. Dallas favored 7, over under 44.5. So on the Chicago side of the ball, well, let's just say basically half their defense is now injured. So we know what to look for on the Dallas side of the ball, but the Chicago side of the ball is kind of messed up as well. I mean, you got Cutler out, Jeffrey hurt, Langford not performing, White not performing. So it's kind of a mess there in Chicago right at the moment. But so I want to touch more on the Dallas side of this ball. But one interesting stat I want to throw out to you and get your thoughts on it, Pat, is that week 1 Dak was the chalk. Everyone was thinking Dak just because of his salary. He's been mediocre probably at best. But one thing I thought was really interesting is 72% of his passes have gone under 15 yards. So with that being said, how do you want to position the Dallas side of the ball and the receivers, tight ends, knowing that he's mainly going to everyone under 15 yards?
Ezekiel Elliott.
Yeah.
Is that what you're expecting me to say? No, I think you're setting me up there for Jason Witten and Cole Beasley has been his favorite targets throughout the first 2 weeks of his tenure underneath center for the boys. But I think with the Bears losing so many people last week, I think that they lost Danny Trevathan, Eddie Goldman, their nose tackle Eddie Goldman, their inside linebacker Danny Trevathan, their outside linebacker Lamar Houston. They lost their free safety Adrian Amos to a concussion. They lost their slot corner Bryce Callahan to a concussion. Now they travel to Dallas on a short week to play at in the afternoon. This is a Sunday night game. Excuse me. Man, this looks to be a spot where Dallas is going to do what Dallas does and possess the ball, own the ball, and just run it out on them. They have played stout run defense so far this year. They held the Texans running backs to only 129 yards on 35 carries at 3.6 yards per carry, and Eagles running backs to 90 yards on 25 carries for 3.6 yards per carry. Now their fantasy stats may be skewed a little bit because Ryan Matthews did sneak in 2 goal line touchdowns last week. So they're still only allowing 3.6 yards per carry, but with all these injuries, with Goldman and Trevathan, Goldman, man, he was a 336-pound nose tackle. He was Pro Football Focus's number 12 run-stopping nose tackle out of 69 tackles last season. Trevathan was Pro Football Focus's number 9 run-stopping inside linebacker. So a lot of people were saying last week, fire up Ryan Matthews that the Bears defense were terrible against the run. The Bears defense were stingy against the run. They were very good, but losing these 2 pieces, man, I mean, this is a great spot for Zeke to bounce back after fumbling twice last week. They let Alfred Morris come in, but Zeke piled up 44 touches in weeks 1 and 2. He's currently tied with David Johnson for the NFC lead in rushing. He's an elite spot this week.
Agree with you there. Game flow's in his favor, and you just threw out some great stats there. That I think it's going to be hard to try and fade Zeke in a game like this.
He's probably one of my favorite tournament running with all the lower priced fill in running backs we have due to all these injuries. One of my favorite things to do in tournaments is pay up at running back with some guys like Zeke and David Johnson or Williams, and build lineups that way, because that lineup construction is going to lead you to something so different than what most people will have.
Yeah, I agree with you. Anything else on this before we move on to the last game here?
Underneath the Bears here, I have no.
Same here.
Cowboys defense.
There's no wasting time on the. Actually, that's a good call. Cowboys defense actually is probably a good play here in this scenario. So.
Yep.
So for anybody playing the main slate, that ends all the games for the main slate, all the analysis for those games, which is kind of unfortunate because this next game, this Monday night game, has some pretty good options here. It's Atlanta going to New Orleans. New Orleans is favored by 3 at home, 53.5 over under, which is the highest of all the games, and yet we can't play it on either FanDuel or DK for the main slate. So.
You had to have already locked and loaded the Thursday, Monday slate, and there is a afternoon slate on both sides. So
I think there is still a Sunday, Monday slate, but it's not as big as.
Yeah, the contest kind of sucks. So
right.
I don't get it. Which is kind of puzzling to me why they did that, but that's another story. But as a Saints fan, these two teams, I've been to several Falcons Saints games in the Superdome before, and they tend to go one or two ways.
Yeah,
they tend to be super high scoring and back and forth, but most of them, from what I've witnessed, have been super sloppy and slow. Both these teams not being that great at executing offensive plays and on defense. A lot of penalties. They know each other really well, so they know each other's weaknesses. They tend to line up against each other quite well. So it'll be interesting to see if this does shoot out. I kind of think it does, just based on the trends we're seeing this season with the Saints and last season. But I've been to plenty of Falcons Saints games before where they've been quite sloppy and disappointing, which would play into the hands of someone who hasn't been in fantasy's favorite circles lately, and that's Mark Ingram. His usage is low, but this is a favorable matchup where the Falcons are allowing over 90 yards per game to opposing running backs. He has kind of dominated for over 41% of New Orleans offensive snaps. He's only lost a few touches to Traverse Cadet and Tim Hightower. So things got better in week 2, whereas his snaps jumped to 55%, and he only lost 5 touches to these complimentary backs. So the Falcons, they allowed 22 carries for 131 yards and a touchdown to Raiders running backs last week. And they've been known in the years past to bleed fantasy points to opposing running backs. So I think if you did play that Thursday, Monday slate, I hope you got some exposure to Ingram. But if you are playing the Sunday, Monday slate, I think Mark Ingram is a sneaky tournament option here, where most people will be looking to load up on Drew Brees and his home splits and Willie Snead, who's everybody's week 1 fantasy darling.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Everyone knows that Drew Brees plays better at home in a pretty good matchup here. Last 2 games, first game is QB5, last game is QB3. Yep. So he's off to a great start, and just playing at home, he's that much better. But the other quarterback that's actually been doing pretty well on the other side of the ball is Matt Ryan. He's been QB2 in game 1, QB6 in game 2. This is another scenario where he's going to have to throw.
No.
The running backs, it's been a running back by committee pretty much, and they haven't really done anything too amazing. So he's going to have to throw the ball quite a bit, and we all know that Saints virtually have no cornerbacks left. So
Delvin Breaux's out, P.J. Williams out with a concussion.
Yeah.
So they're bless their hearts.
So Matt Ryan could be in for a good game here, and of course the guy he's probably going to target the most would be none other than Julio Jones. So
yeah, man.
Tell me about Julio Jones. You like him in this matchup?
Oh, this is a beautiful spot for Julio. I'm kind of worried about his ankle. He's always had this thing kind of popping up on the injury report the last couple of years. So we'll have to wait and see. Hopefully you played him on a late swap site like DraftKings, but against a undrafted free agent in Sterling Moore, who is only 5'10", 202 pounds. Julio at 6'3", 220 pounds. Should just have his way in this matchup. And like I said before, I've been to plenty of Falcons Saints games, them being close NFC South rivals. Being in the Superdome or watching, you roster Julio in daily fantasy and you watch him on TV is one thing. But going to the Superdome and seeing 6'3", 220-pound Julio, right in front of you against 5'10" cornerbacks, and you're just like, holy hell! As a Saints fan, you just stop and you say a prayer for poor old little Sterling Moore before the ball snaps, because you just know if Matt Ryan, all he has to do is toss it up and it's Julio's ball, touchdown. So everyone knows what's coming. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out, since everyone does know what's coming, what the Saints will do to scheme to stop it. Will they double cover? What will they do? So that's kind of what I mean by these games have been, gone one or two ways. They've been super high scoring where Julio's been able to have his way, or the Saints have been able to stop it, and the Falcons haven't been able to do anything else. But I think this year will be different with them having Mohamed Sanu, and now they've been using Tevin Coleman out of the backfield as well. Who's caught a lot of passes. He's in on 44% of the downs, and in the passing game usage has been 53% in the passing game. So it has really boosted his PPR value on a site like DK. So I think he's another sneaky tournament option on the Falcons side of the ball.
Yeah, Jacob Tammy's another one that's been pretty interesting lately, getting a lot more targets, seeing a lot more opportunities. But one thing I just want to touch on real quickly about Julio, going back to him real quick. In the games last year, or his last two games with Delvin Breaux in the lineup, he went 9 for 149 and 6 for 93, and that's versus their best corner. And here he is up against, what was his name, Moore? I can't even remember his name.
Yeah, Moore.
Yeah. So he's definitely in for a great matchup there. So
5'10".
Yeah, lock him in. So. Loving Julio. I like Matt Ryan for tournaments. I think that's a good pairing there. Could be, you have to find the right slate to play it, but you could do something like a Matt Ryan, Julio, pair him up with someone on the Saints.
Ingram.
Needs, Cooks,
Ingram.
Thomas. Ingram, yeah. So look to find some players in this game. It's going to be high scoring. I think it's going to be a little bit lower owned, so just find the right slate for it, though.
Absolutely. If you're playing the slate, you're playing it to get exposure to this game here. So fire them up.
Definitely. Anything else for this game before we head out?
No. That's I believe that touches it.
Yeah. So that's it. We've gone game by game, gone through everything. Like I said, we tried to go quick on some things. So if there's a player or there's a team that we didn't touch on that you want to talk about, definitely hit us up on Twitter. We'll be happy to go through it with you. You can hit up Pat at DFS_Saint.
Yes, sir.
Or you can hit me up at MLanglo. That's MLANGLO. I myself have sometimes trouble spelling it, so to make sure I spell it out for everyone. Again, apologize for the technical difficulties we had in the beginning, but I'm glad we got this through, and hopefully you got some good tidbits from it.
Yeah, if you guys, if I didn't cover anything like Marty said, please hit me up on Twitter. I love talking about fantasy sports and fantasy football, so I know I missed a lot of things in my notes, so I'd be happy to go over it again. And I wish you guys the best of luck this week. If we don't take anything down, I hope you guys got something from this. And if you do, if you did use something you got from this and won something, tweet us. Let me know about it so we can let the world know.
Yeah, definitely. So, yeah, good luck to everyone this week, and we'll be around this weekend as well if you guys have questions. And hopefully, everyone has a successful week 3, and let's all make some cash.
Yes, sir. Good luck, guys.
All right, thanks, guys.
See ya.